Hi everybody, how are we doing today? So I just wanted to provide a little update on what I've been working on in Tiny Cosmos and all of the refactor I've been doing, pulling things over. So one thing I wanted to work on was pulling over the system map from the prototype that I had created back a while ago and bring that into the new project. So this is a system map that we've created that uses line renderers, and there's some custom functionality that we've added into this to make this work. So I'll just show you quickly kind of what the original looked like and what we're kind of shooting for. That you have your ship and the position that you're currently at and a little indicator of where you're traveling. And then you can travel to the new destination and do things like trading commodities, buying and selling stuff. You can go into the shipyard and change the way your ship looks and do all that kind of fun stuff. And this will persist when we come out of here. Come back out here and we have the double wings and all the other things that we added. And you can select which path you want to go to and see what's there and travel to the position, and it'll mark that you visited the location, all that fun stuff. So we want to bring a lot of this over. I'm not sure if we're going to have all of the trading mechanics, but we'll definitely need to have some shipyard mechanics for the upgrades and things like that. So I started to work on this as a editor script and a manager that can hold the data and save all of the asset data in here. And so what happens is you come into this editor and you can see all the individual nodes, which have their own actors, but these are tied to real data elements in a scriptable object here. So everything kind of bounces back from the actor to the manager to talk to the data. We have some methods for doing things like connecting nodes, which will create a path and then actually set the node's connection IDs inside of the node data itself so that we can see that in our game and read it and do whatever we need to do on the map. So what we do is we created some nodes that are simple actors with an image underneath. The map node actor has a couple of different images defined for what it's going to look like when you visited or not visited or completed a stage. And we can, when you select two nodes, like this node and this node and any node really, as long as you have two nodes selected, we can go in here to our map and connect the nodes. It'll automatically create the path and we can move the node and the path will automatically update, which is super cool. To do this, we used line renderers, and these line renderers are in the UI. The plan being that we can eventually actually have a spline along here and have curved paths and things like that. So that will help us in the future. To do that with a spline, or not a spline, but a line renderer in the UI, it doesn't normally respect the canvas. So if you have a canvas with alpha and you want to shut this thing off, all of these lines would stay in the scene, which is kind of obviously a pain. So what we do is we come over here and we create a custom material. And what that is a simple shader graph that I've created here that just has a texture that comes in. And then we have the vertex color, which is the color from the line renderer, will pass into there. Normally the vertex color would also would be the actual canvas group, but since the line renderer overrides that, we need to pass the canvas group's alpha in here. So that way we can say we'll multiply the vertex color's alpha with the canvas group's alpha and ultimately the texture's alpha before we output that. So that way we can use a transparent material rendering on both sides so that the line can always be seen. And so that creates a very simple material that does what we need. So then we can come back over here. That material makes this display work properly. And so if we change this alpha, that will work. Now to provide the value, we have created a script here canvas group alpha sampler. So this just runs an update method and will set the alpha to whatever, on the material to whatever parameter you set here. Very simple script. Canvas group line renderer, that parameter name. Grab the values there, and then if it's not null, we set it. And if we don't have a canvas group, then it's always visible. So in the future, we could, of course, make this a little better by putting the canvas group alpha sampler on the actual canvas group itself. So that way there's only one element actually sampling, or one script sampling every update. And then we could have the paths subscribe to an event to update. Now that's great for gameplay, but in the editor, the situation that kind of gets to be a little annoying there is subscribing to the events in the editor. So I didn't want to do it that way for now. We might actually end up having that operate that way in the future, just for runtime. But you know, if we don't need it, we don't need it. So there's a lot of editor scripts supporting these things. Another thing to point out is that since these are 3D elements and we want the stages to apply on top, 3D elements generally always do apply on top, no matter really what you do, unless you really get crazy with your overlay cameras and things. So what we did here is kept it simple. So we have one camera. It renders the background and the 3D elements. So it has just a camera calling mask that excludes the elements and the overlay elements, which would be like the nodes here and the system map. And then we have another camera that renders these overlay elements. So that way you always have these nodes on top. And that's obviously helpful, or necessary. We have this little icon here, which we're just using as a placeholder to show where the player is. The thought being that we could have the player and any enemy ships or anything in the system traveling along these paths and have encounters along the way. Within the paths, we also have a secondary line renderer. So as you might guess, this also needs the canvas alpha sampler, and we'll need to update our material here. So what this one is intended to do is to act as the indicator for that path selection. So when you're at a location, we can turn this line renderer on and have it display this graphic animation to show that that's where your destination is. Handle that there. I think we have to put this in the right layer for it to work properly. So we'll need to update these two things. Okay, so to get this working, we'll need to update that prefab. So to make sure that we have the canvas group alpha, we really should have these set to the proper layer. There we go. And there we have that. So to make that always work, I just need to make sure that the path actors sorting layer is higher. The next thing to note here is that we've added a couple more editor tool functions. So when you select the map manager object itself, we created this little toolbox with a draggable set of functions so that you don't have to necessarily be working in the inspector here, which allows us to do simple things like adding a node, clearing the map, loading the map, updating the actors. So you can clear the map, load the map from the asset. You can update actors, which is like, this just lets us force an update. So if something weird happens or doesn't look right, we can do that without having to clear and load the map. So something simple like adding the node just lets us give us a new node, and then we can come back in here and connect them. I think I probably will add another little window up here for these simple connection functions. So when you are selecting two nodes, you'd get a little icon for that, or a little button for that. So that allows us to do all that stuff. So for those editors, what we've done is we have this map manager editor. We have the buttons that we saw in the inspector there. We have a reset tools window that just resets the window back to its default position, just in case the user moves it or resizes the scene view window and can't see it anymore. So we just set that through editor prefs, and we handle some pretty basic stuff here. We have an editor startup function that just makes sure that if we select the object that it reloads any data and everything is initialized. We have some dictionaries that need to be populated, so that's what that's doing. We come in here, and whenever we change selection, we're just making sure that that same thing happens, so that if there happens to be more than one map manager for some reason, that we'll make sure we update it each time. We have some basic stuff for the dragging of the window, and just creating this simple set of buttons within that handle and the add node function here. And one thing that was really important for this was that we need to make sure that when there's a compilation that we reload and basically call this editor startup function on all the managers in the scene. The editor application delay call handles that, which is wonderful. And so that gives us the ability to make sure everything's clean after compilation. Without that, we would have a lot of issues with duplicate paths being created, or sometimes paths or nodes not being created and connected properly. And you get an error if you went in here and tried to move one of these. So we also gave ourselves the ability to change the ID. So each time we create a map node, it checks to see if it is the actor for that node by its matching its ID. And if we already have one for that ID, it'll generate a new ID. But obviously numeric or hex IDs like this are not the most human readable. So that gives us the ability to come in here and go to map and change the node ID. Gives us a simple pop-up, and then you can say something more descriptive. And then the name of it changes in the UI, the node ID on the actor changes, and it changes in the data as well. And that includes changing the ID within its connections. So you can see that it's now updated that to the new ID, and everything stays all connected and working. So that's pretty cool. It is connected to the game's overall workflow. So when we launch the game from a stage, we have the option to use direct play, which we've basically just set a flag here. So if direct play is set, then when we are on a stage like this and we hit start, we will basically load all of the game managers and things that need to support all of the game mechanics. And that way we can make sure that those get loaded to the scene and before anything in the scene actually runs. So what we get there is essentially a loading screen that initializes everything, and then we'll jump into the stage, unless there's an error, of course. And it looks like there is. Ah, yes, I know why this is happening. So one of the things we did there is we changed those node IDs, and that's where all of this comes into play. So we have spline data here for this stage, right? And that has all the information for the user for the stage that this is associated to this spline data. So in our map, we need to make sure that spline data is assigned to one of these nodes. So this is the primary node. We're just calling it that. So it's essentially the first node that we're going to use. So we'll go ahead and assign that scriptable object into the spline data here. And that will make sure that when we load this stage, which has this spline data asset in it, it can find that and it'll know which stage we're on. And we won't have that error that we had before. So here we are in the test scene. Roll stuff up. Pick up some things, and when we get to the end of the stage, what should happen is we'll go to the stage select screen, and that primary node that we were on that's associated with this stage is where it's going to put our player. So there we are. It looks like we have an issue with our background camera. We need to subscribe to some events. Show and hide should actually be something more like, if we have an animator, use the animator, but either way, we'd like to call our activate menu invocate and our deactivate. All right, that makes sense. That you need to call those events to make it work. I think that should do it. All right, so that's what I've been working on this week. I hope you guys are as excited as I am to check out all the new updates that are coming and all the progress. I really want to make this game as best as it can be, and I'm making it for you guys. So, you know, stick around. Let me know what you think in the comments, and like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. See you next time.